of the FBI and Justice Department regarding the probe into Russian interference into the 2016 election and the possible role of anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign in that interference to warrant an entire second special counsel. Joining me now is one of those House Republicans, Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman Gaetz, thanks for joining us as always.
Thank you for having me, Jake.
So you've spent a lot of time questioning the investigators. I wonder, do you agree with the premise of the original counterintelligence investigation that Russia interfered in the election and that it's worth getting to the bottom of any possible American assistance?
Absolutely. Russia engages in a malign influence campaign all around the world. They seek to undermine democracies by undermining democratic institutions. They will continue to try to do that in the United States. And there are a number of ways that our supervisors of elections and heads of our departments of state around the country are fighting to ensure that we're sufficiently resilient to combat that threat.
Okay, good. I just wanted to know what you thought about that because I wasn't sure. Today you demanded a second special counsel be appointed. In point of fact, independent counsels are for violations of law. What crime are you suggesting might have taken place here?
Well, here we see the potential collection of intelligence on the Trump campaign. We also see the misrepresentation of information before the FISA court, which would violate Wood's procedures. That would be something that we would absolutely want to get to the bottom of. And, you know, we've already seen a number of personnel changes at the FBI and Department of Justice that seem to indicate something's not right. When you've got to demote and reassign your head of counterintelligence, when you've got to demote and reassign one of your top lawyers in Lisa Page, when you see Andrew McCabe fired and referred for criminal prosecution, we see Bruce Orr not disclosing the fact that his own wife was working for Fusion GPS, and all of a sudden he goes from being a counter-narcotics professional to working on counterintelligence issues. It just seems like a lot of information that could lead to hopefully some good bipartisan reform of these entities.
So I wondered if you were going to bring up this issue about what was presented before the FISA court, because I don't know how you know that. You're not on the House Intelligence Committee. You haven't seen the underlying intelligence. How do you know that anything improper was done before the FISA court?
Well, we have received briefings from the FBI regarding the elements of their application. We've also read the memo from the House Intelligence Committee that the entire House voted to declassify and the American people have been able to observe. And that memo laid out pretty clearly that the principal piece of evidence, the first piece of evidence laid out, was this dossier that was paid for by the DNC.
No. That memo made it very clear that it was Papadopoulos' meeting with the Australian diplomat in which he acknowledged that he had talked to somebody with Kremlin connections about dirt on Hillary Clinton emails.
That was one element, Jake, but they said that the first piece of evidence.
The Nunes memo said specifically that that was the reason that the investigation was launched.
No, that was a memo from Peter Strzok that did initially launch the investigation, but that didn't lead to the application before the FISA court. My allegation is that the Woods procedures were not followed before the FISA court. There would not have been any presentation to the FISA court in the absence of that very dossier. That's not, Joe, don't take my word for it. That was the testimony of Andrew McCabe.
Well, I mean, I have talked to people at the Justice Department who say you keep saying this and you don't know what you're talking about because you're not on the House Committee on Intelligence. You haven't seen the underlying intelligence.
Those very people have also briefed members of the House Judiciary Committee. I would point out to you, Jake, that the Judiciary Committee has oversight over the FISA process. That's not exclusively the purview of the Intelligence Committee. Frankly, I wish the Judiciary Committee would be more active in interviewing witnesses regarding the procedures that were followed and the evidence that wasn't presented. These prosecutors before a FISA court did not have a defense attorney in the room. They had an obligation to present not only the evidence that was favorable to their position, but the evidence that wasn't favorable, and they gave no indication that the DNC was involved in paying for this, no indication that Christopher Steele was involved. There was only a vague reference to Glenn Simpson.
They said that there was it was paid for by political opponents of the president. But
that references Glenn Simpson, not Christopher Steele, and it was Christopher Steele who the FBI indicated had been deemed uncredible because he'd lied to the FBI about other disclosures to the media.
Let's step back to the issue, to the reason I have you here, which is I want to talk to you about this call for a second special counsel to investigate the investigators, to investigate the FBI, to investigate the Justice Department. Have you spoken directly with President Trump or any officials inside the White House about this legislation? Are they on board?
I have not spoken to any of them about this legislation.
Has anyone else in your group of members of Congress who introduced this legislation, Congressman Meadows or anyone else, DeSantis, have they talked to anybody in the White House? I'm just looking to find out if the White House supports this.
Sure. So Mr. Zeldin was the principal author of the resolution. He said at a press conference earlier today he has not spoken to the White House. Mr. Meadows indicated that he has not spoken to the White House about this resolution. I have not spoken to them about the resolution, so I don't know if other members of Congress have, but the principal authors of the work product that was filed today have not spoken with the President or the White House about the specifics. Now, obviously, there's a lot of information that's referenced regarding the status of the Hillary Clinton email investigation, the double standard at the FBI, the levels of bias at the FBI, and over time, I've had discussions with the White House about those issues, but nothing about this call for a second special counsel filed today.
You slammed the Attorney General Jeff Sessions over his decision to recuse himself yesterday, a decision rooted in Justice Department ethics guidelines. You said this about Mr. Sessions. Let's roll that tape.
It's like, over the Department of Justice, he's got Stockholm syndrome. He's become sympathetic with his captors over there in the deep state.
So I'm just trying to understand this theory. The entire Justice Department and intelligence apparatus leadership was appointed by President Trump. So who is the deep state you're referring to? Is it the FBI director, Christopher Wray, the director of national intelligence, Dan Coates? Who is it?
My specific concern deals with the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. I think Mr. Rosenstein is deeply conflicted. I think that in many cases he is playing Jeff Sessions. I think Jeff Sessions has been functionally, set off into a corner at the Justice Department on these critical issues. I don't think that there was a legal or factual basis for his recusal, and I think that it's really hurt the country.
You said that the White House is not yet fully informed about the extent of the information collected on the Trump campaign. What are you talking about? What information do you know that the White House and the President do not?
I cannot talk about that in an unclassified setting, Jake, but there is an additional fact pattern that has nothing to do with the individual that's been talked about in the media regarding the collection of intelligence on the Trump campaign. That information is in the possession of some congressional investigators, not others, and it's my hope that we're able to have greater transparency around those facts.
And you learned about this how?
Again, I'm not going to get into that because it could disclose classified information.
I want you to take a listen to the former Republican governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. He's a former U.S. attorney who has continually advised President Trump on the Mueller investigation. Take a listen.
Bob Mueller himself is not a partisan. He's an honest guy. He's a hardworking guy. He's smart. And you can't argue that the investigation hasn't been effective so far. Got a number of guilty pleas, a couple of indictments in a year. It's pretty good work.
Is Chris Christie wrong there, sir?
I don't agree with that assessment. When you look at the indictments against the Russian entities, this is information, as I stated in response to your first question, that has been widely known, that around the world there is an effort by Russia to interfere with institutions of democracy. So it's not some groundbreaking endeavor, this initial round of indictments. And my belief is that based on the team that Robert Mueller has assembled, that there's great bias against the president, that tools have been used that are unfair, particularly if the collection of intelligence on the president's campaign in any way influence the Mueller investigation. And we don't know that to be true, but I certainly want to find out more, and that's why I support the appointment of a second special counsel.
Congressman Gaetz, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Jake.
We have a lot to